listening to the lineage. Multiple messages.
We're going live on Facebook.
We live now?
Yeah.
Nice. Welcome, everyone. Coming up from the soil in your favorite county of Washtenaw. Welcome to the Entheo Show with your guests, with your hosts, Colin McDougall and Michael File. Gentlemen,
What's going on? Oh, man. Another exciting episode. That last one was an exciting one for sure, too. At least Ebert, we didn't stop talking right up to the end. That was great.
It was a very interesting and informative episode that we had last time. And what are we at now? Like 8?
What?
Are we on like episode 8 now?
I think this is maybe episode 9.
I think it's 8.
Wow, it's hard to believe.
Oh.
And also last week we had Kelsey Taylor on the first half of the show. And so if you haven't already, check that episode out. It's very informative. On today's episode, we have a couple of really exciting guests who are great drug policy reformers within themselves. And just all around great advocates for the movement. We have Kat Ebert from Students for Sensible Drug Policy at Michigan State. And we also have Michigan State Senator Jeff Irwin on the second half of the show. So we look forward to talking with them. And yeah, exciting.
It's going to be great.
Yeah, we've got news again today, though. I think last week we skipped most of the news. We've also got a plan of the week this week. We don't have a book, but I think that's all right. I think a book is something that we found is hard to keep up with. But what is in the news?
You know, there hasn't been much in the news with psychedelics lately. We know that California did a lot with getting something passed out of the House, and it's going to the Senate now, and they're going to legalize entheogens in the state there. And I think Vermont went ahead and passed something recently. Maine lawmakers have introduced a bill to decriminalize possession of all illicit drugs to help end the war on drugs. Representative Ann Perry is a lead sponsor, which would make possession of controlled substances a civil penalty, punishable by a $100 fine. It also includes not prosecuting people who seek out the anti-overdose medications. I think we talked about this last week. The Naloxone, yeah, for their own behalf or for others. So they won't prosecute for that, which is great. And that's coming out of Maine. Silo Wellness, the psychedelic company, signed a binding letter of intent for a multi-year patent license deal to exclusively produce, market, distribute, and sell its patent-pending metered dosing psilocybin nasal spray in Colombia and Brazil.
I know how I feel about that.
Yeah. They explain that metered dosing ingestion options with quicker uptake speed are necessary as they can help avoid accidental high dosing. And that's when a consumer takes another dose before experiencing the effects of the first one, which I think we've all done that.
I'm all for insufflation of whatever substance you're after. Don't get me wrong. I just don't think it's how the mushroom was meant to be delivered. But that's, I guess, my opinion. I have no scientific backing for that. They have a vested interest in it. So, although you mentioned California, didn't the Wiener bill get? It was Senator Wiener that introduced it. Sorry, I didn't want to. I want to clarify. But didn't that bill get hung up, and it made it through one committee in the House, but it went going to next committee? I thought it got hung up with the "what about the kids" argument because it includes all drugs, and so I thought they
Okay.
had to go back to the drawing board, maybe.
Yeah, I may have misspoken on that one, but yeah.
To remove the all drugs and just do the entheogens first, which
Mhm.
strategically, I think, you know, I think they have the ability, if they just get with the right partners, to push what's there through and include the decrim nature piece. There's no reason statewide they shouldn't be decrimming all in California now. It's 2021.
Yeah, I agree. They should be doing that. They should be. They're doing it everywhere slowly. It looks like I got an update here on that weeks ago. Yeah, it advanced to the health committee on a 6-2 vote, and it had passed the public safety committee.
Okay, yeah.
already
So
at that
I
point.
think it's the health committee that's like, what about the children?
Yeah,
Because it includes heroin and cocaine, and I realistically, it's a far more sensible policy. Although you want to talk about new policies, this is a little bit of a rant and tangent, maybe, but the FDA trying to ban menthol flavored cigarettes and flavored cigars. Talk about yet another racist drug policy that is like entirely targeted at young Black folk. It's ridiculous. And I think the ACLU has just spoken out against it. And, I understand the intent, but the intent's backed behind a letter written in 2013 that wasn't responded to, that was about marketing towards, young people of color. And this is taking away the product altogether when the regulation should be on the market, not on the actual ability to have it. Prohibition doesn't work. We know this over and over, but it's not because of some logical train of thought that this is happening. It's an racist agenda. I think it's pretty clear, but I just wanted to come out and state that because
yeah.
pretty
There are a
pissed.
lot of flavored. There's more than just menthols that are flavored as far as smoking. There's smoking cigar tobacco that's flavored.
Yep.
And I don't know
Well,
why
all
they
the
picked that one.
backwoods,
Yeah.
most your blunt wraps, all that is gone.
Exactly, and they have. I don't know why they rule or they singled out menthol cigarettes. Why not do all cigarettes? Hey, how about that idea?
Well,
Well,
I'm a
there
smoker.
would be like
I've got my opinions on that with my relationship with plant teachers. I have
like a total underground network of tobacco trade, and those cigarettes they're gonna get here somehow into the consumer's hands. Is and basically with the menthol thing, I think that'll happen too.
there's a better way to address the health concerns of mentholated cigarettes or cigarettes in general without further criminalizing any behavior. And the war on overdose and the war on drugs, and prisons, and take sensible solutions for community and, harm reduction. Freedom for arrest from people for non-violent, non-aggressive, actions.
Mhm.
It's silly.
It is. It is.
But I think we're going to get into that with Senator Irwin a little later today, if I had my guess.
Yeah, and cat too.
Oh yeah. No, 100%.
Yeah. Do we go on to our psychedelic plant of the week?
Wait, she vice chair? Oh, speaking of SSDP, right now is Sensible 2021 So if you're interested, you should hop on over to SSDP's site. I'm sure Kat will talk about it, but join Sensible 2021 this weekend. They've been doing a lot of work to put this together. I'm speaking tomorrow. I believe Kat is probably speaking this weekend. So lots of great things going on with SSDP. Always a fun time and super cheap registration.
Can you elaborate on that? Do you go to ssdp.org? Is that where we're going to find that?
Yeah. I think if you went to ssdp.org, you could find tickets for Sensible 2021. I don't actually have the info in front of me. Kat's probably
She'll be able
gonna
to update us on that.
go over all that. I probably should know that. It's on my Facebook.
But tickets, I know that you can, whatever like you can afford, you can pay for the tickets too for the SSDP 2021. So it's really just donation, really.
Nice.
It's a lot of great insight, and you learn a lot from those conferences. That's where I met Mike.
That's how we met. I don't think that's how me and Kat met. I don't know. We're gonna have to trust her memory for this because I was probably high. I mean, she was probably high too, but she's better at remembering things. I shouldn't blame it on being high. I should blame it on my bad memory. Hey,
Looks like we have her here.
Of Kat. Oh, see, I wore the wrong hat. Hi, Kat.
Hi, everyone.
Hey, Kat.
What's up, Kat? How you doing?
I'm pretty good. I graduate tomorrow.
Oh my goodness.
So
Is this
excited.
real life?
Isn't that crazy?
Oh, wow.
It's so
Come
weird.
a long way.
Yep.
So what exactly, well, actually, I'll ask you that in a minute. Welcome to the show. This is Kat Ebert, president of MSU, Students for Sensible Drug Policy, also vice chair of,
Remember.
just board, sorry, of SSDP, and a position that I held for a few years, and very glad to have been able to work with Kat for several years now and have you on the show. So yeah, you're graduating tomorrow. What's your degree in? What are you studying?
Neuroscience with a pharmacology and toxicology minor, because I'm going to be a psychedelic researcher and addiction psychiatrist.
Nice.
One day,
Cool.
like a decade from now, but
So I'm assuming you got grad school and stuff ahead. But you've had a pretty interesting run so far. I know you've gotten to do a lot of research with ketamine. Can you talk about that?
yeah, I would love to. So I pretty much just lucked out. I got a really cool PI professor. I mentioned I actually ended up in a bladder lab, and I was like, who the fuck cares about the bladder? And then I realized that no one knows anything about the bladder, and ketamine is really bad for your bladder. And yeah, so I investigate ketamine-induced cystitis. So I use mouse bladders and basically apply ketamine directly to blood vessels in the bladder and see if it dilates or constricts. So yeah, I haven't been in my lab for over a year because pandemic, but yeah, I'm really grateful to have gotten to work on some research. It's psychedelic research. It is, even if it's not neuroscience, because ketamine is a psychedelic, but so yeah.
How did you get involved in all this, Kat? When did you decide, hey, I got to start looking into this stuff now and really dedicate my life to it?
Yeah, so it actually, when I was winter break of my freshman year of college, so 2016, and it was, I was 16, 2016, 2016, 2016, 2016, 2016, 2016, 2016, 2016, 2016, 2016, 2016, 2016, 2016, 2016, 2016, 2016, 2016, 2016, 2016, 2016, 2016, 2016, 2016, 2016, 2016, 2016, 2016, 2016, 2016, 2016, 2016, 2016, 2016, 2016, 2016, 2016, 2016, 2016, 2016, 2016, 2016, 2016, 2016, 2016, 2016, 2016, 2016, 2016, 2016, 2016, 2016, 2016, 2016, 2016, 2016, 2016, 2016, 2016, 2016, 2016, 2016, 2016, 2016, 2016, 2016, 2016, 2016, 2016, 2016, 2016, 2016, 2016, 2016, 2016, 2016, 2016, 2016, 2016, 2016, 2016, 2016, 2016, 2016, 2016, 2016, 2016, 2016, 2016, 2016, 2016, 2016, 2016, 2016, I had my first profound psychedelic experience. And it was like the same week, the same night that like, it was right after the Mexican firework explosion and the Berlin Christmas market attack, and the one ambassador for Turkey or Russia got assassinated on live TV. It was like that same night, and everything was just happening. And I was like laying in bed, like, what the fuck is going on right now? And it just kind of like forced me. And I'd been struggling with depression for years and had, tried treatment and nothing was working. And this one particular experience just totally shifted my perspective. And after that night, I was like, holy crap, I want everyone to have access to these medicines. Like I'm happy for the first time in years. And it wasn't something, those aren't things that you should be happy about in any way, shape, or form, but it was just allowing me to zoom out and to, kind of stop focusing on the things in my life that I thought were the end of the world. As we all know that psychedelics do. And then I was like, wow, I want everyone to have access to these medicines. I don't want anyone to ever feel like I felt. And so the next day, I think the next 2 days, it was like in my basement on YouTube, like all over the web, like, how do these work? What's going on here? Like, what's this doing to my brain? And that's when I found MAPS, Multidisciplinary Association for Psychedelic Studies. And yeah, it wasn't until about 2 years later, that was when I was kind of like, okay, I want to do research with this, when I found the term neuropsychopharmacologist. And then a couple of years later, it was actually Bicycle Day of 2018. I was watching a MAPS webinar for LSD's 75th birthday. And I was on their website and I clicked for students. And then that is how I found SSDP. And the rest is history. And I started my chapter. It wasn't up and running until around November 2018. Had no idea what I was doing. I thought it was going to be easy. It wasn't, but it was so worth it. And I met the best people in the whole world. And I met Mike, and I met all my chapter members. And yeah, as a neuroscientist, I had no policy background, had no idea what I was doing. I was like, I don't know what's going on. Like, I just want to be able to research these one day, and it would be way easier if they were legal. So yeah, and that's how I got involved. And then over the past couple of years, it's just the more I've learned, the more, because I originally got involved with this mindset of I want to make these drugs legal so I can research them and because they're fun. And then it was very quickly, I was like, oh no, I want to end the drug war because it's racist and it's like harming so many people, and prohibition doesn't work. And so that's my story.
Wow. I just went on the exact same tirade right before you got here. I love that. So we met at an SSDP conference, right?
2019, Chicago.
Okay. I was a little fuzzy for sure, but then I'm like, wait, no, I remember now. But I would have thought it was Baltimore. That is to say, if you are a student, you should definitely be part of SSDP. Colin here, again, that's how we met. Nick Zotel, who's been on the show, that's how we all met. It's created a lot of really amazing friends in my life, and like powerful drug reformists and activists. So very glad to work with everybody as part of SSDP. This weekend, though, is the conference, Sensible 2021. What can you tell us about that?
So this year, the conference is actually being put on by my best friend, Evan Hazlett. He's contracted to run the entire thing. He's done a phenomenal job. Yesterday was the first day of the conference. I believe that it's over for today, but tomorrow it starts at noon Eastern. Mike is speaking on a panel. I will also be speaking on a panel, which I think kind of ties into what I'm going to talk about today. It's called Finding Common Ground, and it's a debate. There's not really a winner, but a debate about different different methods of decriminalization. So we have a decrim sum argument, which aligns more with decrim nature, which Jules from SSDP UC Santa Cruz that helped pass the decrim nature there. They are going to be speaking on that point. I will be speaking for decrim all drugs. And Nick Lewis, my vice president of my chapter, is going to be arguing for legalization under a non-capitalist society. So there's a reason we're not doing a winning debate, because Nick would win. So that's the ideal end goal. So
yeah.
Oh, and you can register at conference.ssdp.org.
So that's an issue I'm very passionate about. As a co-director of Decrim Nature Michigan, that's an argument I've struggled with internally, because I am very firmly a all drug decrim now, and I love this non-capitalist framework. I'm interested in seeing how that comes out to play, but that's a whole bag of worms right there. I do want to get into this because it sounds like you want to talk about it. Decrim Nature versus Decrim All. You're part of Decrim Mid-Michigan. Last time somebody from Decrim Mid-Michigan was on the show, it was Decrim Nature Mid-Michigan. A lot has changed since then, but really exciting and progressive work. I'm excited to, hear some updates, because I'm not part of that chapter, or group, I don't really know what's going on. So.
Yeah. So, I wanted to run a decrim bill or anything. Again, no policy background, neuroscientist, don't know what I'm doing, but learning on the go. So I wanted to run, after Measure 110 passed in November, I was like, let's do a decrim all campaign here in Michigan. We could totally do it. I'm very big picture, very motivated. I'm like, nothing is impossible. We can do it. And so that was in November. And I was like, I don't know what we're going to do, but let's try to figure it out. And then I want to say it was probably in February or March, probably March, is when the Decrim Nature Mid-Michigan group formed. And I decided, I was like, well, I don't really know how to do this, but let's join this Decrim Nature Mid-Michigan group. And we'll just push for Decrim Nature. Again, I'm like Mike, I'm decrim all drugs all the way, because it's going to it's going to reduce the most amount of harm from the war on drugs the most immediately. So that's how that started. And then we found out that the mayor of East Lansing, which is my home, my city, has already expressed support for decriminalizing all drugs. So we are running a Decrim All campaign here in Michigan, and we are partnering with Decrim Nature. We actually had a meeting with Larry and Carlos, the co-founders of Decrim Nature National, and the new executive director of SSDP, Jason Ortiz, last Friday. Yeah, I set that up.
Oh my God.
Yep. So coalition building on a national level.
I mean, I love Larry. I talk to Larry all the time, but Carlos and Jason are two people I look up to in the work we do so much. And, being of a reform all, decrim all stance. And, I'm with Decrim Nature in terms of, I do come from the policy background. I do recognize if we don't protect accessibility, the right to grow, all these things right now, it's going to be a lot harder to do as part of a decrim all or retroactively after that. And that's why strategically I chose this path. But a lot of people have, been very firm about like psychedelics are better. And we've talked about this a ton. I want to be clear. There is no better drug. There are only different drugs, and there's different people have different types of reactions to different things. I don't know where I'm going.
Go on with your saying. Before
we also want to protect that grow, gather, gift model. And so that's something that we are including in this decrim all resolution. And additionally, we're going to decriminalize the possession and use of all controlled substances, as well as the possession and use of all drug paraphernalia, which would include things like test kits and fentanyl test strips. Because when we're really like talking about because I love plant medicines. I mean, they've healed me, helped me so much. I want everyone to have access to them. And again, like access and education, two most important things when we're talking about any kind of decrim campaign or any kind of drug policy in general. Because you don't want people to just agree with you because they're agreeing with you. You want them to agree with you because they understand what you're talking about and they understand that that's the best option for the community. So if we're still, and one of the points that I brought up when I was kind of at the beginning going back and forth with Larry a little bit, we're in alignment now though. One of the points I brought up though was, when we're talking about the people that need access to these healing medicines the most, the people that have been the most traumatized by the war on drugs, whether it's like direct trauma by being incarcerated or family members, or it's generational trauma, those people need arguably the most, they need these access to these plant medicines the most, and they can't have access to them if they're incarcerated for having a substance use disorder with a highly stigmatized substance. So that's really why we're trying to run this Decrim All campaign. And now that there's hope in East Lansing, in my home, we're really excited, and we're really excited to be working with Decrim Nature, especially on this national level, to get in alignment with our messaging, because we really are, there's been, Mike kind of brought it up, psychedelic exceptionalism is that the term that's used to describe this, like psychedelics are good, better, and other drugs are bad or not as good. And I think we all know that psychedelics are incredible, amazing, and they're, we can't really describe them with science, what they're really doing. But by saying that it's better than another drug, you are furthering that stigma on these other stigmatized substances that, are causing, people are dying, people are overdosing. So, yeah.
Can I just step in there? Essentially, I think a key point for me and message to other activists out there is you can't be fighting for Decrim Nature as a means to fight a war on addiction and not be also very actively and progressively for Decrim All. It may not be logistically possible in some, formats to run both side by side. Cat's been presented with a very unique opportunity where leadership of the city is already having this conversation, including the DN model within that is something cities are going to be a lot easier to do. The state level, dealing with Legislative Services Bureau, they like to make the least amount of changes to language as possible and not split things up. And that's going to be a lot harder at the state level. And I do want to have this discussion even before we do Decrim Nature at the state level of what Decrim All looks like. And I know you've been having those conversations and I haven't been participating. But maybe is that group still happening? Decrim Michigan, statewide calls, and if so, somebody wanting to be actively involved with that. How?
Yeah, are you asking for like the Mid-Michigan group in particular?
Yeah, is there a way for somebody that's actively interested in getting involved with Decrimming All in Michigan? How would they get a hold of you or join that group?
Yes. So you can send me an email. It's cat.ebert, kat.ebert @board.ssdp.org. That's my email. And yeah, I guess I would say like for people that want to get involved with Decrim All, the biggest thing that you need to do, and I guess like in advance, is really educate yourself. We have a lot of really phenomenal resources at SSDP about, what the real harms of the war on drugs and why we push for decriminal. And I do also want to say, like, SSDP doesn't push for decriminal only. We do, and that's why we're having this debate, this conference session. We do recognize that the incrementalism approach is that may be the most realistic in some cities, in some settings. So, but ideally, and this was something that we talked about with Carlos and Larry, like we are all in alignment with, we want to end the war on nature, the war on consciousness, the war on land-based people, the war on melanin, the war on drugs, the war on civil rights. We want to end all of these wars. They're all part of our movements. We just need to align on our messaging and how we present that to the public in a way that's not going to create further fear. I know I just went on a tangent because I was supposed to say, how do you get involved? But
No, that's what the platform is for. We have a lot of listeners that want to be involved, and that that's why people listen to our show or watch it. And so any of this information that comes out in tangents is totally useful and good information for our listeners. So we're just glad to have you here. Colin, I've been ranting a lot here. I haven't given you much space. Jim, either you guys have some questions here?
I'd like an update on East Lansing and where you're at with East Lansing. I know you're part of that, Cat. Can you explain?
Yeah, so right now we took this week off because my chapter is finals week and some of us are graduating, and so we're taking this week off. We are going to meet again next week, again on a national level, like a national coalition building level, because the hope is that we can kind of create messaging that we're in alignment with on a national level, and then take that and be able to apply it to different, kind of create an idealistic decrim resolution and then be able to apply that to specific cities and really adopt, kind of combine decrim nature with SSDP's grassroots organizing of let's get this passed through the cities and then we can, pass it through the states. But in East Lansing particularly, we don't have our messaging completely aligned yet. We will in like a week, but ideally I would like to push for the grow, gather, gift model, decriminalization of the possession, use, transportation, distribution, and there's a couple other things of entheogens, plants and fungi. And then we also want, decrim of possession and use of all controlled substances and drug paraphernalia. Idealistically, this is something that probably isn't realistic on a city level, but a reallocation resolve in the resolution, reallocating city funds, because there is a specific, so what we've done is we've taken the Somerville, Massachusetts Decrim Nature resolution that passed, literally copied and pasted it, and then edited it a little bit, added some things in, changed the words. But we kept that resolution of the grow, gather, gift model completely the same with, changing Somerville to East Lansing. And then there was a resolution in there as well to prevent any city funds from any department, police department included, from using any city funds for any arrests or anything involving the possession, use of controlled substances and entheogens.
So, okay, don't lose that thought. Don't lose that thought. I just want to point out that last clause actually got amended out of the Ann Arbor clause or the Ann Arbor ordinance, the removal of city funds. And that is something we're still actively looking at. But I think we're focused on the statewide effort first, and then we'll go back and rectify that. But please, sorry, I think that's really important is removal of funding, but you were talking about reallocation of funding. Yeah, what does that look like?
So ideally, we would reallocate these funds to invest in the communities. And I would love to have like free anonymous drug testing services, community drug testing services, and harm reduction services where you can go and you can get, people can get clean syringes and whatever they need for whatever. But because the thing is, what we really need to like recognize is that prohibition does not work. It doesn't work. We know this. I mean, we tried it with alcohol and like, look how that worked. And now one of the most deadly drugs is like the most acceptable. But prohibition doesn't work. We know that. We can't keep pretending that abstinence only based recovery models are the answer, or that, taking drugs out of the picture is going to make people stop using them, because you're not going to stop it. They're not going to stop. They're always going to find a way into wherever, the community. So people are always going to do drugs. It's a natural animal instinct, actually. Mongooses like to trip on some psychedelic plant. Elephants get drunk on fermented fruit juice. It's a natural animal instinct to want to get high, to want to change your state of consciousness. So we're not going to stop drugs. People are going to do them. So how do we make sure that they're not dying? How do we make sure that they're safe? How do we make sure that their families aren't struggling because someone is in prison? The main breadwinner is in prison. How do we make sure that people that are suffering from a substance use disorder feel comfortable and safe asking for help? As someone that suffered from a severe substance use disorder that really derailed my life for about 2 years, I can say that like I didn't feel safe or comfortable coming forward, especially in my position of, upper middle class white woman at Michigan State, didn't feel safe asking for help. And so we really need to, like, when we're talking about sensible drug policy, we need to really focus on the people that are the most directly impacted and uplift those voices. It always comes back to that.
So I'm gonna take it back to that. You talked about the war on melanin and prohibition doesn't work, and it is 2021, and I already went on a tirade before you got here. But the FDA is trying to put a ban on menthol cigarettes, and
I heard about this yesterday. One of my chapter members, we were in Meyer standing waiting to get, we took cans of bottles back, and he was telling me about this, and he was saying that Biden was saying that it's because Black people smoke more menthol cigarettes, and so it's like well, you tell me what you heard, because he was telling me something, and then I was like, are you kidding me? Is that real?
So I haven't heard any of Biden's statements. My understanding is it is a response to a 2013 request that marketing campaigns of these products were being targeted at young Black men. And so the response then fell out and nothing happened. And so the same group, I guess, is raising concern again. And so the response this time is, of course, again, run to the ban, which already didn't work. But like, in my mind, this is a prohibitionist policy against people of color.
Yep.
Like, I mean, I'm not saying only people of color smoke menthol cigarettes or blunts, but I'm just baffled that in 2021, this is real life. I do believe we're running close to when Senator Irwin should be hopping on. That could be at any point. But I do want to also say that you're more than welcome to stick around for that discussion. Join in with questions. I think you'll love talking with him.
And I want to just say, Kat, I'm so glad that you're part of this movement and you're a leader in this movement, because you're really inspiring to listen to, and it's really a benefit to have someone like you at the head of something like this. So I'm really glad that that's the case.
And also, it's very inspiring to see other SSD peers from Michigan, take on such great roles and like lead in their own communities, and at a national level too.
Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, I'm just honestly like, I'm just glad to be here, and thank you so much for having me and giving me a platform to speak. And um, you guys are all awesome, and yeah, I'm just so glad to. I'm so grateful to be a part of this, and the youth perspective is so important. And I was talking to Robin Schneider of Michigan Cannabis Industry Association the other day, and she was saying, when I go and I speak at places, when I go to town halls or whatever, and I speak, it's received very differently than when a young person comes and they speak. And people. It seems now that people are actually starting to listen to young people more, which historically we know is like not really the case. But youth perspective is so important. And another thing that I do want to mention, something else we are including in our decrim resolution, we're trying to include, it's going to get some pushback. So like looking at cannabis, we've legalized cannabis in Michigan. Now the most directly impacted demographic, the most directly impacted people by the war on drugs, by the war on, cannabis, I guess, are young people of color. So those like 18 to 21. Because, like, I don't know about you guys, but I started smoking weed when I was like 17. I was a late bloomer.
Hey, let's be real. I know you're going to get some pushback on the 18 to 21 thing because they've already moved the smoking age up, is my understanding.
Yeah.
But, like, let's be real. I started smoking when I was 11. Okay, this is going to affect people at a much younger age than 18. Again, prohibition doesn't work. There needs to be alternative solutions to this. Criminalizing or even, fiscally, penalizing somebody for, it seems so obvious to me after years that I just run out of words after 30 seconds of ranting, but
no, you're good. It's just we're trying to make sure that when we pass this resolution that young people aren't going to be put in juvie, that they're not going to have a record. At least there still is going to be like civil infraction, maybe MIP, maybe, but like it's going to depend. We're going to have to sit down with the city council, we're going to have to talk to them, but we want to make sure that young people are still not being disproportionately impacted, because what happens if you get caught with weed and then you have a record and then you can't apply for school funding and you can't go to college. And now a college degree is about the equivalent of a high school degree. And so, I mean, not actually, but when you're looking at jobs, so it's a huge setback, and it really affects the youth. And we don't have proper drug education either, so there's that rebel part of it too, that I'm doing something illegal, that teen spirit, like I'm a little rebel. And so there's that part of it. And we don't have proper drug education we just say these things are bad, don't touch them. And then it's like, and I was goody two shoes, believe it or not. I was like, drugs are bad. And then but I was always curious. I was like, I don't know though, like this cannabis thing sounds kind of cool. And then I smoked weed, and then I was like, they lied to me about it all. And so we also want to like, this campaign that we're running above all else is an educational campaign. This is the start of a cultural revolution and a societal revolution, and to do that you have to educate people. You have to teach that. You have to combat the drug war propaganda that we're fed from the beginning of when we can talk and understand words. So that's the other part of decrim all that we really want to also push for. But yeah.
Speaking of education, you mentioned that you're doing this for cannabis, and I want to point out cannabis was legalized, is regulated, and that is for adults over 21. So that's why this is important. We didn't include ages and all in any of our decrim language because we didn't feel it necessary, because a decriminalization just means these plants and substances or whatever are not included in the act as written. It doesn't actually remove the act as written, like a descheduling would, which is something we did push for at the state level, but I don't think it was received very favorably. But maybe we'll hear a little bit more about that later today. I don't know if we'll get into that. But speaking of drug education, though, SSDP has a fantastic education program for young activists. And let me be clear, you do not have to be a student to be an SSDPer. You can be a sensible society member. You can be an alumni.
We have supporters that come to our U.S. Policy Council meetings. I mean, we have like multiple different committees. We are a global drug policy org also. So, we have, I have friends that I talk to every week that, one of my really good friends lives in Liberia. And so we do a lot of stuff all over the world, but we have supporters come to our U.S. Policy Council in particular, because that's where we do a lot of the stuff that's where we do our policy work. So, but yeah, you can be a supporter or a sensible society member. And you can do that just by going to ssdp.org. There's a little donate button at the top. And your support helps us continue our work in ending the war on drugs and uplifting youth voices and, really, making an impact and ending this bullshit war on drugs that we all don't like.
You said it's global. Also very active, not just in DC, but United Nations Office on, or United Nations Council on Council on Narcotic Drugs, something like that. Orsi Fletcher is absolutely amazing. Very grateful to have worked with her and gotten to know her through SSDP. But very active across the globe, and becoming more so now, which I think is one of the major pieces of the leadership shifts that we've recently seen. That's going to come out of that. There was a very America-centric focus, which led to some problems with some of our Latinx chapters leaving. It's really unfortunate the way SSDP has experienced its down, but all orgs experience their ups and their downs. There's all these moments within that. And I think where SSDP is at, and it's really exciting to watch from an alumnus perspective, is a really exciting place. It's going to continue, to nurture those international chapters and really, step up from the next level beyond just the UN and, really be a force in global drug policy.
Yeah, definitely. And we have, in I think it was October, SSDP International officially became our sister daughter organization, something like that. And so, now we have our headquarters in Vienna, Austria, and then we have our headquarters in DC. It's really cool to engage with young people all over the world and learn about different drug policy and, what's going on in your country. And so, it's really cool. And it's cool to, I've met my best friends in the whole world through SSDP. So, and it's amazing. Yeah. Yeah, like Mike and and Jim I didn't meet through SSDP, but we found out very soon that we had connections, fellow friends like Nick and like Mike and Colin. I don't think I've ever actually met you in person, but you're an SSDP alum, so I know that you're cool.
Thank you.
Maybe we should have Jason Ortiz on here sometime.
Yeah, he would love it. Are you kidding? He would love to.
I would love it. I've never actually gotten to sit down one-on-one with him other than, like a minute maybe in the hall at a conference. Conferences can be a crazy way to meet people. And I've just never had that chance, but I really like everything I've seen him do since I met him. He's also the president of the Minority Cannabis Association. Is that right?
Minority Cannabis Business Association.
Business Association. Okay. I knew there was something business in there. Yeah, but very exciting to see what's going on with SSDP. What time are we expecting Jeff? Does anybody know?
Yeah, he should have been on here a couple minutes ago.
Okay. He's busy,
but
so
yeah, it sounds like maybe hopefully he'll be here soon. Yeah.
Well, Kat, do you have anything else you wanna ramble on about? I mean, was it here? I don't think. I'm trying to think. Where Nick went off about sex workers' rights? Yeah, no, that was here. With Ellie Savitt last week.
Hell yeah. Yeah. I mean, so what I would love to do, I'm actually in a national coalition group called D3, and it's decriminalize drugs, sex work, and houselessness. So that's my ideal decrim legislation. I don't know how much that's gonna, in East Lansing in particular, we don't have a huge houseless population. And I also want to say, I say houseless because homeless, there's a difference between a house and a home. So houseless is now the correct term, in my opinion. But so that would be, we don't have a huge houseless population in East Lansing, not to say that there's not, but Lansing, the state capital of Michigan, is has been really hit hard by the war on drugs. It's a majority Black and brown community. There's not a lot of money being invested into the community. A lot of people are struggling. There's a lot of houselessness. There's a lot of highly stigmatized substance use. So that's where a decrim all resolution would really make the most impact. But we're hoping that if we can pass it through East Lansing, that'll maybe push Lansing, because we know that there is some support in the city council of Lansing for decrim nature already. So at the very least, if we can throw in a resolve to decrim the possession and use of all controlled substances, that would help a lot of people. So, but that's kind of I'm all for decriminalizing sex work. I'm still learning the difference as to why legalizing sex work is not actually what most sex workers want. Decriminalizing sex work is what most sex workers want. I need to brush up on my facts on that, but I have several friends that are sex workers, and that is the response that I've gotten. But yes, we're very sex positive in SSDP and sex worker positive. Bodily autonomy all the way. Anyone should be able to put whatever they want into their body, do whatever they want with their body, as long as they're not harming other people. And then the argument of harming yourself gets a little tricky when you're talking about substance use, because, doctors and, people will argue that these substances are harming you, which depends. So, but yeah, I am full, I guess, do you have a question particularly about sex work or?
No, I was just trying to carry on because I do think the war on drugs is, just one piece of a larger social justice equation that's going on. I was actually unaware of distinctions being made between legalized and decriminalized, but should be no surprise that that's the case, because it is with drug policy, and has been for years. No, I wasn't really directing that anywhere. Just
and Ali Savitt, he mentioned a lot about how in Washtenaw County they've kind of decriminalized sex work.
Yeah, de facto decriminalized by not prosecuting anymore, correct?
Yeah,
I heard about that. Jim actually told me about that, and I was like, what? How did I hear about this? How wasn't this national news? This is so cool. Yeah, that's amazing. I mean, I would love, we have talked about in our Decrim Nature Mid-Michigan group, someone has connections to the Ingham County prosecutor.
Yeah, her name's Carol Neiman or something, I think.
Something like that.
I don't know her name, but she's progressive. I know that. She's been on the Smoke and Rope podcast, Ryan Basor's podcast.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'd love. Yeah, I think we're gonna try to sit down and have a conversation with her as well to see if she'll stop, prosecuting sex work, and it would be really great if she could. We would love to have her stop prosecuting, all drug charges. So again, like effectively de facto decriminalizing all drugs on a county level.
Never sit down with Ellie Savitt, the prosecutor in Washtenaw. If there's anything I learned from me and Colin's recent meeting in Lansing, we'd gone with somebody to meet with their rep. They want to hear what reps in other states that are active on these issues are doing. So a prosecutor for one county is going to see what a prosecutor in another county is doing and talk to them about how that's working. Just like chief of police always goes to the police association convention and they all learn the same thing, and it's all, it's a fraternity. And so I think that could be very useful. And after our conversation last week, I don't know if you saw, it wasn't last week, it was 2 weeks ago, last episode, with Ellie Savitt. But if you didn't, you should totally watch it, because he's a fucking rock star. And I think if that's a conversation you're trying to have with your prosecutor, he'd be a hell of a champion to have in your corner.
Yeah, I mean, shoot me an email, give me an introduction, and I'll set it up.
Yeah.
We, there's a friend of mine's family member is a federal judge, and they didn't vote for Ellie initially. And when all his, policies started coming out, this federal judge just got behind him 100% and was really so surprised. And it's a great thing to hear that, because I think there are people in positions like that have seen like the effects of it firsthand from prosecuting people like this and not having anything at their fingertips for tools to help alleviate any pain or suffering that these people endure. And that's going to be really tough for a judge to do, and not have like tools or laws to help people if you see people really being hurt. And I'm sure over the course of decades and decades, it's so apparent that this needs to be changed, and the people at the very top are starting to see it, and it's awesome.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely amazing. Yeah, it really is. I think we really are starting, to back up what you were saying, I think we really are starting to see that at, the top levels. And I really it really comes down to, like I said before, it's a cultural revolution, educating people. Yeah.
Well,
hey, everybody, Jeff Irwin.
Hey, sorry to interrupt. It sounds like I'm interrupting right in the middle of something interesting. Sorry I'm late joining you this afternoon, but it's a beautiful day here in Michigan, and I'm happy to be with you.
We're happy you're able to join us. I know you're extraordinarily busy, state senator. District
18.
All right. Sorry. So where is that? Where is that exactly?
So I represent about 290,000 people in Washtenaw County. And the communities I represent are Ann Arbor and Ypsilanti and Saline and Milan, at least the part of Milan that is in Washtenaw County. And then the townships of Ypsilanti Township, Pittsfield Township, Superior Township, Ann Arbor Township, Salem Township, York Township, and Augusta Township. So basically the eastern chunk of Washtenaw County surrounding Ann Arbor and Ypsilanti. And Saline. Yeah, those communities.
And you're a former county commissioner as well, Jeff?
That's right, yeah. So I ran for office initially in '99 when I was a student at the University of Michigan. I'm originally from Sault Ste. Marie, but ended up going to high school in Lansing. But To extend the story a little longer, I did run for office when I was a student, and I had some ideas of what I wanted to change at the county level around affordable housing and building a homeless shelter and fighting urban sprawl and getting the county more engaged in sustainability work. And so that was kind of the genesis of my interest in public service, really. And so after serving on the County Board of Commissioners for about 11 years, I ended up running for state representative in 2010 and served there for 6 years. And now I'm a little bit more than halfway through my first term in the state Senate, and hopefully I'll be able to serve a second term. I'm certainly going to run for re-election next year. And one of the things I think that has gotten me here with you is just that one of the things I did when I first got elected as state representative was say that we need to change our laws around cannabis, and we needed cannabis law reform. And in fact, we need to end the war on drugs. And so, I've been saying that for 10 years now, almost in the state legislature. And I think that's an important message. We need to end the war on drugs. And, cannabis law reform was an important and huge victory in that regard. But there's more that we need to do, and we need to push on more fronts to continue progress and end this war on our people. And so it's been a real pleasure to work closely with some of you on those previous reform efforts, and now to look forward towards what we can do in the future to provide freedom to people, but also to make sure that folks aren't having to spend time in jail for using substances that the government says are illicit, and that we can finally turn the corner and start talking about stuff like, how can we make sure people are safe? How can we make sure that when people are trying to consume a product, that that substance is the substance that they think that they're getting, and issues like that. So anyway, without going on, that is how I got started.
I think you're in the right place. We literally just had this conversation a few minutes ago, but I'm glad to bring you into this. So, as you know, we won Decrim Nature in Ann Arbor. Then Ellie Savitt, with his, they're not going to prosecute at the county level. The same things, as well as some other things that he included in there. I know you supported us in Ann Arbor, but now with our statewide push, you've been one of our biggest champions moving forward. And we are doing this incremental approach of decrim nature at the state level, or at least that's what we're pushing for. But Kat is with Decrim Mid-Michigan, which is working to decrim all in East Lansing right now, with the same grow, gather, gift model that we do have with Decrim Nature that protects the accessibility and the right to home grow, those sorts of things. So I think you're definitely in the right place to rant about these things all you want. But so I do want to talk about the statewide efforts because we've had our ups and downs. We think we're having some really great conversations with leaders, and then maybe it's not as good of a situation as we thought. Whereas as soon as we talk to you, you're like, well, this is obvious. And one of the things we've heard from senators and representatives is, well, they want to know why are other representatives and senators in states introducing this. And so, as an elected official, why do you support this? Why do you think this is an important step in, ending the drug war? Why decrim nature over decrim all? Is it strategic?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot to chew on there. So let me just pick a few of the items. I started out by, mentioning that I believe we need to end the war on drugs and being, clear about that, because that's where those are my beliefs, and that's what I think we need to do. But of course, politics is the art of the possible. And, what we're trying to do is we're trying to improve the lives of human beings around us, and the way I'm doing it is to do that through public service and service in government, and through the opportunity to make sure that our laws serve human flourishing rather than human suffering. And right now, I think the war on drugs adds to human suffering and doesn't add a bit to human flourishing. And I think it's an important and weighty issue, particularly when you look at how the criminal justice system affects people, particularly when you look at our budgets at the state and local level. So anyway, so that's one of the reasons why I think it's important. In addition to all the reasons I said before, in terms of why do this rather than go for a more sweeping policy, one doesn't preclude the other. These aren't mutually exclusive efforts or ideas, is I guess one thing I would say. And another is that I would just go back to saying that if we're interested in getting something done, I think that focusing on entheogenic plants, focusing on products like psilocybin are good places to focus the discussion, because these products in general are not likely to be substances that lead to abuse. They're not likely to be substances that people, want to use, regularly and all the time. It's just not the use pattern for these substances. And so that right there leads to a slightly easier argument around the policy change. These substances also are not shown to be particularly harmful. I think that there is a dearth of research in these areas, and I'm not someone who is very versed in medical sciences at all, so I don't want to go too far on the limb. But from what I've read, these substances in particular are not very harmful, and so for those two reasons, I think that it makes a lot of sense. I would also add that in general, these substances also have some medical efficacy, that has been shown throughout the years, and so there's that as well as another reason. So all of that, I would just add an additional reason of my own, which is the one I already mentioned, which I don't think is persuasive yet to a lot of other policymakers, but it's just that we need to bring these products out into the open so that people can engage in safer use, and so that the products that people buy can be quality controlled, frankly.
And Jeff, what's the biggest challenge you have in your position as a state senator with getting something like this passed? It's with your colleagues up in Lansing.
Well, I think there are a couple things. One is that I do think that we need a whole lot of education. We're a long way from being there in terms of having a majority of the legislators even really know what we're talking about when we start this conversation. And that right there is just a huge obstacle. When you talk about, say, for instance, entheogenic plants, most people do not know what you mean. And so that right there is a huge obstacle. We were in that same place, I think, with cannabis many, many years ago, but the big difference there is that cannabis use is so much more widespread. And so that led to a whole lot more people out there who, when the myths would come up, when the monsters under the bed would start to be raised, when folks who were afraid would come out and make arguments that didn't make sense, people would believe those arguments because they didn't have any experience with it. They didn't know anyone who had any experience with it who could straighten them out. Whereas with cannabis, that was becoming less and less true as time went on. And so I think that those are some of the things that distinguish this from where we were 10 or maybe even more years ago with cannabis, in terms of educating lawmakers and in terms of just public understanding of these substances and what they do and how they affect people, and sometimes even like the moniker we're using of entheogenic plants is one that I think even folks who know what psilocybin is need to be introduced to.
Right on. Jeff, do you think there's going to be pushback by legislators at all? I noticed last week there was a GOP lawmaker that introduced a THC limit on driving, and I was just wondering, do you see some people gonna stand out against this kind of bill?
Well, I think that there will be opposition, and I think that initially, there will be a lot of lawmakers who say, that's a non-starter with them. And then, the question though is that will there be people who sort of go out of their way to make a point to, be in opposition? I kind of doubt it, but maybe that's only because I don't see the political upside for them. I'm sure if someone sees the political upside for playing to a certain moralistic crowd who finds that these sorts of conversations scary, that you might see that. That's maybe one angle I can see someone playing to come out against this, but there isn't a built-in natural opposition to the idea that we should stop busting people for using these types of substances.
Last week, or a couple weeks ago on our Entheo show, we reported that a company called Minerco said they were going to start lobbying in Michigan. Have you heard of any larger companies or lobbying associations talking about psychedelics?
My initial reaction was going to be no, but actually now that you mentioned it, I did have one lobbyist reach out to me and say, hey, I heard you're working on a bill. Can I see what you're working on? And so, of course, like I do with pretty much anybody who reaches out to my office and says, hey, what are you working on and can I see it? I said, sure, I'll be happy to share it with you as soon as I have something solid to share.
Excellent. I know we had discussed a descheduling route, which earlier we were talking about the differences between legalization and decriminalization. But I know when we had discussed with you, early in our strategy before we'd even come up with our proposed language, we were discussing descheduling versus decriminalizing. So decriminalizing doesn't actually remove any of the laws that say these things are illegal. It just essentially puts a subclause under it that says excluding these substances under the one that says, it seems a bit silly to me versus a deschedule, which just pulls it out. Can you shed some light on why that is that way? I mean, I understand politics and, but maybe you can provide some insight for us.
Yeah, I mean, it really is just going back to that whole idea of trying to not let the perfect be the enemy of the good. At this point, the conversation is, I think appropriately around, what should be society's reaction to the use of these substances, not exactly what should be the rules and the testing criteria and who gets to sell it and what kind of license do they have to get and where can they do that and all of that. So that's basically why, is to focus the conversation around, what it is that, I think we need to win in terms of, the debate currently, which is, what should our reaction be in general to people who use these substances?
Kat, you're still hanging around. Do you have any questions you'd like to throw in there? We also had a question about the plan of the week that I want to ask you at the end of the show if you're still around. But do you have any questions for Senator Irwin while we've got him here?
Sure. So first, hi, I'm Kat. I'm the graduating president of the Michigan State University SSDP chapter, and on the board of directors of the global org. And so I've heard a lot about you. Sarah Noon talks very highly of you. Well, everyone really talks very highly of you, so nice to meet you. But I guess I'm just wondering, so we are running a decriminalize all drugs campaign in East Lansing with, as Mike said, the Grow Gather Gift model, including decriminalization of possession and use of all controlled substances and possession and use of drug paraphernalia. But ideally, we would love to have a reallocation resolution, which I'm a neuroscientist. I don't know anything about policy or anything except what I've learned through SSDP in this work. So I don't, but I've heard that it's probably not very likely on a citywide level. But you talked earlier about, making sure that people know what's in their substances. So I guess I'd love to hear your thoughts on potentially, with a potential decrim all bill introduced in Michigan and within, the next, hopefully within the next decade, hopefully much sooner. Um, but I guess so something that my chapter has talked about is with a reallocation of funds to provide like community drug testing centers, and things like that. So I guess what if we're talking about a decrim versus a legalization, because who knows when we'll actually end the war on drugs. Hopefully within my lifetime, hopefully within the next decade would be ideal. But I guess, yeah, when we're talking about like a decrim resolution, what comes to your mind when we're talking about things like, I guess, like community drug testing centers, other things like that to include in that legislation on a statewide level? Things you think are important to include outside of just the descheduling or decriminalization, whatever it is.
Yeah, I'm sure I'm going to give an inadequate answer to this, but so let me just start by saying thank you for doing all your activism there with SSDP and with trying to lead this campaign in the city of East Lansing. We should definitely connect offline in some way if I can be helpful to you in urging you to talk to certain people who are involved with city about this. That can only be helpful, because I think a good part of what we're doing here is we're trying to make sure that this conversation is out there and try to make sure that people engage with it and answer the sort of question that you're asking me, which is sort of broadly, what do we need to be doing in this space? Which I feel like I've laid out a number of items. So as far as public resources and how we can make sure that those are spent in a way that is more in accordance with a harm reduction model, I think there are a ton of opportunities. And I think those opportunities are, not really on a different track than all this conversation about legalization or decriminalization, but they're certainly, happening in different spaces, and there are different opportunities there. So, I think that ranges from everything from doing decriminalization just around paraphernalia and around sort of like trace amounts left in syringes and issues like that is really important. I think that, not just allowing, but funding needle exchange, I think is really important. Those are sort of like on the maybe easier end of things that we need to do, and then we also need to push for the kinds of things that I think, and it should be public resources, the kinds of things that we've been talking about where folks can actually have their products tested. And I know that that's starting to happen a little bit in the by nonprofits, and so one of the things I think government needs to do is just get out of the way of that right now and not threaten to jail those people, which is basically what's happening as we speak. So that can be worked on both through legislation and through working with the administration, working with the governor's team that runs the Department of Health and Human Services and that run the state police. If the state police were to be more supportive of certain directives, and if the Department of Health and Human Services were to improve the rules in terms of what these agencies could do, they could certainly use more support from the legislature and changes to the law, because the law is a problem in some of these areas. But in general, particularly with the funding side of things, they can make a lot of these changes unilaterally. What else can we say about that? I mean, I also think it's important to add the idea that treatment really needs to be more available. There are a ton of people out there who want treatment who can't get it, and it's almost like you have to be either busted or rich in order to get access, and that's not how it should be. The treatment should be available on demand for people, and that's how, once again, we can sort of like try to focus on maximizing human flourishing and minimizing suffering. There is a lot of suffering that is involved when people get caught into the vortex of addiction.
Definitely. Yeah. And I guess another just one more question. So something we talked briefly about earlier was the youth perspective and youth justice reform when we're talking about these decrim legislation. So I don't know, Mike, I don't know if you touched on it earlier, if there is anything, but I guess like, yeah, with like the decrim nature, the state bill. But yeah, I guess like how we really need to like focus on, because I guess.
Okay, I think I know where you're going with this.
Please.
So with the age of 21 that was included with our legalization bill, that actually, continues to criminalize a group that's more likely to get in trouble for using these substances anyways. It leaves a very young population at risk to still become a criminal and get something on their record over something stupid. And I mean, sure, we've got 7411s and, diversion programs like the sobriety court, which I can go on about for days. But I guess with cannabis, is there a way to move forward on decriminalization of these substances for the 18 to 21? Or, I mean, ideally, like, let's be realistic, 16 to 21 age group. Is there a path forward there?
Yeah, so, I think with this question, like with a lot of questions in this space, like, is there a path? Well, of course there is. The path is 20 senators and 56 representatives and one governor. So yes, there's always a path. But there's a reason why I think we made that unfortunate concession in the, within the drafting of Proposal 1. And there's a reason why I'm trying to focus the discussion around entheogens on, should people go to jail for this, rather than on how exactly do we commercialize these products? There's just a sort of like a one has to come before the other scenario here, and I think that we can make progress on some of those things, and I think it's a particularly strong argument that adults who can vote and go to war and all those things, are cut out of those opportunities, and it's still criminalized for those folks. I also think the argument for younger folks, not getting in trouble for cannabis is strong too. But I guess if you can't tell, I've been approaching this issue from a step-by-step basis from the very beginning, because I think that you can pursue a full end of the war on drugs at the same time as pursuing the steps, and I found that the steps is what works.
Definitely, yeah. It's definitely the incrementalist approach is very effective and most realistic for a lot of places. I'm just a big picture person, and so I struggle with the incremental approach. I get very excited.
I think it's great, and I actually think that what you're doing is a huge contribution to this conversation, because the most important thing that any of us can do, and the most important thing I think that anybody who is listening to this and who wants to see change in our laws around these substances can do, is to get active and to get involved and to start pushing your ideas to the forefront of the discussion in your community, and to say, look, here is something that's happening in our town, in our city, in our wherever, in our county, in our township, and either people are going to jail for it, or people are being harmed because they're hiding, and none of that is good for us, right? How about we change that? And so, that's a huge part of getting any progress on these types of issues, is for folks to step out and to say that. And that's exactly what you're doing.
And that just reminded me, just a general plug to everyone watching. If you are in the East Lansing area, we need people to come speak and support at City Council public comments. So I dropped my email earlier via mouth. I'll do it again. kat.ebert, kat.ebert @board.sstp.org. If you're interested, we need people to speak in support of these public comments. So
if you listen to the recent public comments at the discussion that was had at City Hall recently by East Lansing, there are two really fantastic discussions, particularly the second one I really enjoyed because it did reach beyond nature, which is what you're trying to do there. But for a framework, check those out. If you connect with Kat, I'm sure she can connect you with those. I think we may have even posted them. If not, we will do that. We are running up on 5 minutes to the end of the show. We usually include a plant of the week.
Before that, Jeff,
Oh.
do you have anything else you want to like let us know about? Any other bills?
Oh, yeah.
Just in the spirit of Kat's announcement, I just want to also urge anyone who's listening who is interested in these issues to contact their state legislators. If I'm your state legislator, contact me and ask me, say, what the heck are you doing, Senator Irwin, about these issues? You've got a state representative, you've got a state senator, and ask them about, maybe the question that I just threw out, which is, do you think people should go to the jail for this? Do you think this is something, do you think the way that we're dealing with these substances is appropriate? And engage them in a conversation, require them to engage you in a conversation to the extent you can, either over email or social media or at a town hall or something, and if you want, you can very specifically ask about this issue of, would you be in favor of decriminalizing entheogenic plants? Because working with many of you, talking about this over the years, I'm working on a bill to make that possible and to advance that conversation in the Michigan legislature. And it would be really important to have co-sponsors to legislation like that. So if you can find legislators who want to stop putting people in jail for using entheogenic substances, then let me know. Write my office and say, hey, my senator or my representative is interested in this issue too, and they want to work with you to make sure that we start by stopping putting people in jail for this.
Absolutely. And we're very excited to be working with you on that and to be moving forward. Because I think we are really on the edge of something great here. And like you said, finding co-sponsors is huge. So if you haven't already, write your legislators. We do have formatted letters already. We have a couple of them available. So if you use one of them, use a different one. If you want to write your own, we also have storytelling guides and all sorts of stuff like that. So the plant of the week is actually a plant that won't be included with the entheogens bill. Would be included in Mid-Michigan's bill because it's all plant-based substances, not plant-based entheogens that they want to protect, grow, gather, gift, if I'm understanding correctly. But also Kat is here, so I figured Kat should be the drug, the plant. I know it's probably not your thing. So it's an Ethiopian plant, contains a cathinone stimulant. I want opinions on all this. Jeff, I know your time's very valuable. Do you have any insight to why cat is separated from things like salvia or poppy? Like it's in its own little niche place of the Controlled Substances Act. Both it and salvia like have their own little cutout.
I don't have any insight as to why that's the case. I think, you could look at the timing of when they were added and when they were given their little carve outs, I think, to try to get an insight as to why that is. I suspect that with cat, it maybe has something to do with the fact that, people just see opioid in their opium and they and that, sends them up. But I don't really know. And then, with the salvia, I'm not really sure when that was added, but I do, what I have seen in Michigan is that every once in a while, something new will come along and people will get very concerned about it. And sometimes that's appropriate and sometimes it's not. And so, right now, a lot of folks are talking about, oh my gosh, look at all this Delta 8 that's showing up in the gas station. What are we going to do about it, right? And the question is, what is the right thing to do about that? Given its level of danger and abuse, so what's the right thing? And so that comes up with other things as well, right? That came up a number of years ago with various bath salts, MD, PV, MDEA, whatever those things were. The alarm around that was maybe appropriate. But in any event, what the legislature usually does when something new comes along and there's some level of alarm, whether it's appropriate or not, is they react and they get some sort of reactionary law. And sometimes those laws don't make a ton of sense. Sometimes they even don't make a ton of sense, like chemically or much less, morally or something like that.
So actually, I think one of the parallels you just drew is actually quite relevant. A lot of the bath salts or substances that were being passed as bath salts were cathinones, and various analogs of substances such as what comes in cat. The reason I picked this, though, really interesting. I'm sure you may or may not know, but it's exciting. It's a Brood X cicada year. 17-year cicada only comes once every 17 years. It's big news. It's going to happen in Michigan. But there is we like mushrooms here on the Entheo Show. And, any mushroom nut's going to get excited about cordyceps. Those mushrooms that grow inside of insects, ants that crawl to the top of the leaf, they bite down, mushroom grows out top of their head and sporulates over the whole colony. It's called Summit's disease, and it's really, productive way of populating as a mushroom, and it controls the muscles and the brain. So they're very medicinal, and there's some that grow in various cicadas. There's also a very closely related one, but in a different genus, I do believe producing the same medicines as the cordyceps. But that it's Mesospora, and there's Moususpora cicada and Moususpora Levospora. They're very similar. The former is supposed to happen this year with these ones. The second, I think, happens on one of the shorter ones. But the second was just found in its last season to not only produce these medicines, but also the cathinone found in cat and psilocybin. Take that one and unpackage it. I don't know if you can. There's a mushroom growing in a little tiny bug that is producing the same cathinones as this cat, which is similar to bath salt, if we want to go that avenue with it. But then it's producing psilocybin like the mushrooms, and it's highly medicinal for you.
Fascinating.
I don't really know how to unpackage that, but I thought it was a perfect plant for the week. So Moususpora Levospora is going to be looked at heavily by mycologists this year, I think. And
how many cicadas should you take at a time?
So ideally, this will be a fruiting body type situation. So once they're about to shed their skin, it'll climb out their head, and you just harvest a little fruiting body out of their head. But no, ideally what's going to happen is that we'll find a few infected specimens, isolate them in laboratories on agar, and then grow them out on shed insect skins and snake skins and things like that. You can totally do this in a lab setting in a much more sustainable method than growing a bunch of cicadas that grow once every 17 years.
Great.
And we're not sure that this one contains that specific species, but it does contain the Moususpora cicada. But last time this one happened was 17 years ago. We didn't even think about this type of research 17 years ago on a very closely related Moususpora infestation to cicadas. Not 2019, we discovered this. So I think a lot of people are going to be looking for this. It's very exciting. Do we have closing thoughts from anybody? Everybody.
I want people to go to Facebook and follow State Senator Jeff Irwin on his Facebook page. He's got you have a coffee hour coming up, Jeff, on May 15th at 11 a.m. on Facebook Live. So check that out, everybody.
That's awesome. Thanks for that, Jimmy. And, it's always a pleasure working with all of you. It's great to spend some time again with you and see you, even though it's not in person. And I just really appreciate the work that all of you are doing to talk about these issues, and anything you can do to spread that conversation to more communities, and so that, we've got more supporters in Lansing or at the local level, all the better. Right. And, that could be anything from, like you're suggesting, Jim, to, follow your lawmakers and engage them, all the way to, some of this research. I learned something new about cicadas tonight. Or, if we're strategizing, how can we grow support in some of the places where we don't have support? Maybe there are some ways that we can look into the ritual use of some of these substances. That's something that we haven't talked about at all, kind of the religious angle of this. There are maybe some traditional tribal practices that could be a window for us into some parts of the state that currently are not represented by people who support this.
Kat, last thoughts?
Yeah, just thank you for having me. This was really awesome. Just to echo Senator Irwin, global change starts locally. So grassroots is really how we're gonna be able to end the war on drugs most effectively. If you want to get involved, get involved. Go to your city council meetings, start talking, and start educating yourself. Again, I'm a huge education freak, if you haven't figured that out. So, but yeah, thank you so much for having me. This has been really awesome. So.
Colin?
I don't really have much. I know there is a Decrim Nature Clubhouse event coming up, if you do have Clubhouse. And also, I just wanted to thank Unity Vibration for hosting the Michigan Psychedelic Society 2 weeks ago. We had a really great time there. They have a new kombucha out. It's called The Fungus Among Us. And I think Mike named it. So
nice.
Check
Kombucha Chaga Stout.
It's delicious. Unity Vibration.
Delish.
Ypsilanti.
That sounds amazing. I'm gonna have to go check it out.
Good announcement. Also, Decrim Nature's doing their big fundraising drive. Buy our t-shirts. That'll send them some money. Give them some extra money. Go to our Act Blue. We've shared it before. Go on Decrim Nature, Michigan, and find it. Donate to Donate Michigan Psychedelic Society. If you have money, great way to participate. Yeah, I think that's a show. We've thank you, Senator Irwin. Thank you, Kat. We'll see y'all in 2 weeks. I do hope Detroit Psychonaut Academy will be our next guest. So that's what we hope. See you then.
Bye.